Todo esto es bioeconomía
Bioeconomy.
en la Amazonía. Y promoverla nos lleva a un futuro con más
qualidade de vida,
Well-being.
calidad de vida,
oportunidades
económicas
Economic opportunities.
y protección de la biodiversidad.
Biodiversity.
conexão,
Innovation.
Convergencia para la bioeconomía en la Panamazonía. Panamazonía en red. Foro de innovación e inversiones en la bioeconomía. Sean bienvenidos.
Welcome everyone.
sejam bem-vindos.
Bienvenidos a todos y todas.
Welcome, everyone.
a Panamazonian Red.
Welcome to the Pan-Amazonian Network, the forum in bioeconomy, and this is done by the Pan-Amazon Network for Bioeconomy, and the forum is talking about the connection of innovations and convergence between the interested parties in different sectors to promote a biosustainable economy for the whole of the Amazon. And today we are concentrating on the value proposals for bioeconomy, and we're going to have a regional perspective with guests from Bolivia, Surinam, and Brazil, and Peru. And my name is Humberto Gomes, and I work in CI, which is the Conservation International, and in Tropenbos International, and we also work in Asia and Latin America. We have Ecuador and Bolivia, and we're also part of this network as co-leaders for the strengthening of the competencies in the network. Today, I have with me a few exceptional members of the panel. So one that is from the Association of Agropecuários de Beruri, Keivan Hamoud, and he's been working with traditional population and the people who live in the forest and looking at the focus of public policies. Today, he emphasizes projects that look at the production chain for the nuts and extractivism, as well as conservation, contributing towards the project based on cooperativism that generates employment for the traditional producers, and all of them connected in a chain. We also have from Surinam, Goedschalk. I'm not sure I pronounced the name properly, but he is the CEO and founder of Biotara, a pioneer company that works with some indigenous populations in the Amazon to produce botanical ingredients with very high quality for the cosmetics and personal care. He is from Surinam, and he also works for the United Nations. He has 15 years of experience in the development and sustainability, and his work is made up of showing that the forest can provide a prosperous bioeconomy. So we also have Luiz Brasi, Filho from Imaflora. He has worked with field projects and socio-biodiversity, especially in the Amazon. And today, he is the manager of socio-bioeconomy in Brazil, and he has helped with 40 companies, 88 institutions, and 44 different Indian ethics, and he is responsible for the management of intelligence in the network and also NGOs for the sustainable networks to generate more value, always conserving the forest. We also have from Peru, Percy Summers, who works in Conservation International and Amazon Business Alliance. Percy is the scientific director of development, and he has a PhD in planning and environmental projects, and also a master's in the Amazon University of Brazil. And He started in 2009 as the coordinator of ecosystem services. Then he became a director of the sustainable punishment of Peru. And also, in terms of biodiversity, he's a leader in the country. He leads a multidisciplinary team that supports the implementation of projects with an holistic and integrated focus according to innovative development models that are scaled up. And he also works in Automayo and in the Amazon Business Alliance. And his interests are in the interface between the sociological issues, sustainable landscapes, bioeconomy, the management of natural resources, the agroforest sector, solutions based on nature. And before we start, I would like to mention to all of you that we have the opportunity of translation services, simultaneous translation, so you can choose the language you want to listen to the conversation in. And we have English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And everybody who has questions, please use the chat. So before we start, I would like to say that we're going to talk about how to value and increase the competitiveness of the socio-bioeconomy products. So to start, I would like to invite Keivan to share with us the experience that she has from ASSOAB. She has very important work with the local communities. And I would like you to share with us what you have been doing and how we can actually fix the price of the nuts and make it easier to access markets, easier for the local population to access the markets. So what about your experience? So I would like to thank you for the opportunity of being in this panel, introducing our work from ASSOAB. It is an association of extractivists in Beruri, a small municipality in the state of the Amazon, and it has a great production of nuts. So I would like to start talking about what we do. So ASSOAB is an association that processes nuts, and it is in Beruri in the state of the Amazon. And the main focus is to make sure that the people work with extraction. They do responsible work. They are accountable for what they do. So in the 30 years of its activities, we have worked with nuts since 1926, generating stable revenues for isolated communities and respecting their traditional subsistent ways of living and conserving the environment. The association acquires nuts from the Amazon in natura from more than 150 families that collect in the Chimitari indigenous area, and they are all inserted in the municipality of Beruri. The activity of ASSOAB has three main fronts. So we act on the management of the processing plant for nuts. It was the first agro-industry with a community base that was established in the state of Amazonas, and it benefits biodiversity products, especially the nuts coming from the Amazon. And in the future, we're going to work with butter and oil to process the butter of urumuru and the chestnut oil as well. And as also working with Andiroba, Copaíba, and Tucumã that have a huge local potential. We also work with the community. So we do the empowerment of the extractive communities and strengthening the decision-making at a local level, and also the production of sustainable products. So nuts, as I said, we're going to invest in the processing of murumuru and the processing of the oil to add value to the local production. Now, talking a little bit about our innovation and strategies in terms of resilience according to climatic conditions in the territory. Before ASSOAB, we had the main problem of the territory, which was the low value of the products that caused great dependence and financial dependence on the intermediates, the commercial intermediates in the chain, and that reduce the prices and not guaranteeing the value of the product and the quality. So there was a limitation in these markets when we talk about socio-bioeconomic products, and they became less competitive, although the municipality had a great potential. And considering that, we had economic potential of the products present in the Amazon, but they were not used commercially, and they were taken to other municipalities or even to other states outside the Amazon. So we started working on strengthening the value chain, especially in the organization of the production at the base. And as a result, this generated autonomy with regard to the intermediates when we started organizing this, bringing best practices and investment in production infrastructure through projects, international and national projects. This made it reduced the financial dependence on the intermediates for the communities. And there was also training that was a main focus so that they would be able to organize the production, and also for them to add value to the products through good management practices, and this is something that was not done in the communities. And besides guaranteeing regulatory compliance and the quality of the production, it also provides sustainable development in the communities. We also work with added value that improves the quality of life of the communities, and this strengthens the relationship between ASSOAB and the communities, so the association can compete for the best prices and brings best prices for the communities, because before they did not have this opportunity. Just so you know, before ASSOAB worked in the territory, the price of the can of nuts, which is the measurement that is used by the communities, was 15 reais per can. And nowadays, when ASSOAB entered, they started adding value, they started training the extractions and the people who did the extraction, and then now the can is valued at more than 100 reais per can. So we have very little nuts available in the market today, but the people who are making their extractions, they have better prices. And the other thing that ASSOAB does is take the production to other markets with this added value. So access to markets with better prices, and we're going to have the organic certification for the nuts and the communities. So we'll be able to process the products for the international market. And this strengthens the position of ASSOAB in this local value chain. Our impacts, we have 40% of our employees full-time are women in the processing unit. 350 families are supported in this value chain of the nut with the direct purchase of the product. 3,000 hectares of preserved forest with the areas of action of ASSOAB. They are indigenous plots of land and 2 reserves as well. So 4 units of environmental conservation and 60 jobs in the agro industry. So this is a little bit of the impacts generated beyond what is generated by people who make the extractions, and also for communities and the general population in the association, and also in the territories where it works.
Muchas gracias, Keivan.
Thank you very much, Keivan. And it's very interesting what you're sharing with us about your experience in ASSOAB. and especially talking about access to the market, as well as the diversification of the different products of bioeconomy. Now I would like to invite John Goedschalk for him to talk about his experience. Of course, all the territories are different, so he's going to share some of the experience that he had of the communities in Suriname and Brazil related to bioeconomy, so that John, please share with us your experience if possible.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I think what might be most interesting to share is one thing I learned over the last year and a half, working in Brazil, and that's that the bioeconomy infrastructure in Brazil, as far as I can tell, compared to a lot of other Amazonian countries, certainly Suriname, is highly advanced, right? So what I mean by that is that here in Suriname, for example, where I've been working in the NTFP industry, I think going on 7 years now, working either with smaller communities or myself. I have a lab here at home where I produce certain oils and butters on a regular basis. But what I've really learned is that when you don't have the basics in place, laboratories for testing quality, certifiers to provide the right types of certification, third-party processing opportunity like you have in Brazil, where there's multiple factories where you can rent capacity. You don't have the right types of studies and educational opportunities like you have in Brazil. I mean, in Brazil, you can run into many very well-schooled people, PhDs in forest engineering, or specialists in cosmetics industry chains. So what I've found when I started to cross the border from Suriname to Brazil is it was just a whole different world in terms of capabilities and shared facilities that are there in Brazil. So what I've really seen here in Suriname, working with multiple communities, is you have to build everything from scratch. Like you have to build the community capacity for governance. You have to oftentimes bring electricity and water. You have to really develop the entire agro-industrial chain, oftentimes from zero or near zero. So for countries like Suriname to get out of that, I think it's going to take an incredibly concerted effort on a government level, probably financed by a range of multilateral development banks like IDB and others, because I don't see this maturing naturally, so to speak, right? And if you look at what Brazil has been doing for, I think, the past 50 or 75 years in terms of investing in first its forests and then its agriculture and now its bioeconomy, I think you can see that probably there's a lot that can be learned from what has and hasn't been achieved in Brazil, for countries like Suriname to kind of leapfrog, if you will, into the next level of the bioeconomy, which I see as increased local processing in the communities with decentralized installations, which is what Biotara works for, so that we can maintain the majority of the value in the forest and thereby ensure that standing forest becomes worth more than cleared land, right? Very much as what Keivan was already talking about. That's exactly our formula. Whereas Keivan and her organization, I think, are more on the capacity building level, we are very much on the commercial level. We help cooperatives connect to the global markets, right? So we are very much a commercial company focused on marketing, focusing on quality, assurance, traceability, all of these different elements. And then we work with cooperatives in Amazonia, both in Suriname and Brazil, where I have to say again, due to the advanced infrastructure in Brazil, we're light years ahead there, right? We're already in production. We're working with multiple communities, multiple clients, whereas in Suriname, there's much more work that needs to be done. You're talking about maybe 50 years of development that we haven't gone through compared to Brazil, so to speak. It's certainly on the bioeconomy infrastructure level.
Many thanks, and yes, it is challenging. And one thing that we have learned it is that these not only capacities but all the means that John is mentioning are so different between the countries in the Amazon region that the precise reason we work on this network it is to share these learnings and all the points that you have mentioned, John, are very interesting. I'm talking in English. Son importantes porque justamente
Well, they are important because one of the questions that we have for later on is related to the capacity that is necessary to add value and place value, right, in bioeconomy, the socio-bioeconomy. And John has talked about several examples and several elements. And we should take into account the moment that we want to add value to the products. Okay, so let us continue. And I would like to invite Luiz from Imaflora, and he's going to share with us about the work of Imaflora. Imaflora is a very well-known organization, not only in the Amazon, but also at the world level. I had the privilege of meeting him several years ago. We worked together creating the bioethical union of bioeconomy, and we started working many years ago, so it's nice to know what they're doing. And one of the things they do, one of the lines that they work with is the network Origins Brazil that was created in 2016 to place value on these socio-biodiversity chains. So, Luiz, could you please share with us your experience in Imaflora and what kind of experience do you have in adding value to the products and the services related to socio-bioeconomy? Luiz, please. Thank you, Humberto. Thank you, colleagues, and Keivan, that I also know. It's good to see you here with us, sharing this moment with you. Thank you to all of the organization of the event for the invitation to be with us here, with you here, sharing our experience. Humberto, the BT was one thing that inspired us here in Brazil. Patricia, our director, you maybe know her. And she was very inspired in UBT and other mechanisms, also SFC, and we're completing 30 years of this organization already. So if we had this certification and verification and the experience of Imaflora in the public policies as well as in the high development systems for cocoa and oranges and for the forests, this definitely inspired what we created. I'm going to share this with you. But let me just step back a little. When we talk about bioeconomy and how to add value to bioeconomy, this is a little bit of what we're going to talk about here. It's important to reflect that when we talk about bioeconomy in the Amazon, we're talking about the biggest tropical forest in the world, where probably there is the greatest biodiversity in the world. And over there are several ingredients and raw materials with a huge potential for the development of new products for small, medium, and large companies, very innovative products, and they associate innovation in production, and it's allied to the biodiversity that is maintained by the traditional and indigenous populations. So when we talk about the Amazon, this forest, the standing forest, who is protecting and conserving this forest? It's traditional and indigenous populations. And I connect this that the Origins Brazil is born there. So if we have these traditional populations, the indigenous populations with their way of life that are completely associated to the production of standing forests, how can we create a way of valuing these ingredients and for the market to recognize the fundamental role of the traditional population, and then the consumers consuming these products from companies that develop the ingredients according to their relationships with this indigenous community that take care of the standing forest. So I think this is what we're doing. We created value in Brazil for these products, this socio-biodiversity, that's what we call it, inside the standing forests and managed by traditional and indigenous populations. But to do that, you can never do anything alone. And as our mentor said, for complex problems, we have to work in a network. We want to create this economy with added value and these products. The first thing we have to do is organize a network so that we can do things together. So from Origens, it is from Pará, the state of Pará and Altamira, when Patricia went there to Altamira to create the strategy to value the products of socio-biodiversity. And this starts with the communities. What do the communities need? So I want companies that value our ingredients, and they must have fair long-term contracts with us. I want to tell our story. And then we have a great innovation, which is the seal of Rede Origens that follows the products. And this was a demand from the indigenous communities. We want to tell our story. So the seal is a QR code. And when the consumers access this, they know who produced it, the story of the product, the story of this community. So this innovation comes from listening to the communities that worked with the creation of this seal. That's very interesting. On the other hand, as a network, what do the companies need and what did they ask for? Oh, we want a long-term relation. We want trust in the delivery of this product. We need traceability. So also inside the network, there was the creation of the traceability, and it starts from the origin of the territory with offline mechanisms, and the producers are registered through a tablet, through an app, to know the origin of the product, where it comes from, who collected it. And when you access the internet, and today we have more internet, but 10 years ago when Origins was born, we didn't really have a lot of internet in the forest, but you could connect the traceability with a platform. And then the companies could access the traceability and the origin of all the information. So to make this evaluation process and add value, we have to listen to the players that are part of this bioeconomy. So listening in the community, we created a seal, we created a great brand. Listening to the entrepreneurs, we created traceability, the ethical trade that evaluates the relationships during the year. So we connect, and it makes it easier for the company to build these relations that are monitored through the ethical trade. And what is ethical trade? So they have a fair price, the establishment of contracts, equality in terms of relationships, and respecting the traditional way of life. All of this was built over time together with the different players. And Humberto, we bring these small, medium, and large companies to these fair relations, and there's a great communication strategy. So the consumers will be able to know these ingredients and products, and they will value the companies and associations and cooperatives that produce these products, respecting their traditional way of life and the standing forest. It's more or less how we organized this, and we received a prize from the UN in terms of sustainable agriculture, and it was recognized by the Bank of Brazil, and we received an award in the World Economic Forum. So it is a network solution built with several players, with the cooperations between the government, the consumers, and the different companies. This is how we're organizing it. And a little bit of the numbers of this network. We have 40 companies, 6 territories with 60 million hectares of this activity, 60 indigenous ethnic groups, and we got to 8 million in terms of products traded within these fair contracts and valuing the forest and this way of life. Thank you very much, Luiz. And it's very interesting and inspiring to listen to the value that came out of it. So this is definitely something that we want in the Amazon region, the collaboration, and everybody's working together, and this view of the chain, so you cannot work alone, it's a network, it's a system, and they're all connected. And it's not only the production and the processing and the trading, all of the other organizations that can actually support this system and make it easier to have services at the same time. So this is really important. And what you said, and definitely the numbers that you shared at the end are very inspiring. So we can see that it is possible to create a critical mass, something that we always talk about. How can we always have a critical mass of understanding in the Amazon region? And that will be at an economic level that is inside other economic production systems and that compete with the different ways, that don't compete with the different ways of life in the community. And the idea is to get together different companies and work in an alliance. And now I would like to ask Percy to share his experience of the Amazon Business Alliance that he's been working in from Peru and the network that Peru has. So I'd like to know about the strategies and experiences and how you have advanced. So Percy, please, could you share your experience with us? Thank you. Thank you, Humberto. And well, following the line of what you have been telling us, what Keivan, John, and Luiz have been saying, we in Peru also have a great challenge. So how to value the products and how the communities have have been using and sharing and taking care of the forest, and how they can all be part of a solution and continue to receive the benefits from this biodiversity. And that's where the Alliance comes in as a platform, because we recognize that there's a whole experience with the communities, but since we take advantage of the market, giving value to these products, and our alliance makes this bridge between the communities, the investors, the entrepreneurs, and the production. So they worked a lot with two strategies. So we're talking about something that is scalable and with technical assistance and with the best markets that can pay better prices for the products that help to conserve this. So this is a line of action of the Entrepreneurial Alliance. And there's also the issue of working with all of that. So we work with this whole system so that they can move in the direction of the enterprise and move on to something that is more aligned to the conservation processes. So the Aliança Empresarial was a proposal that was worked on with SAIDI. SAIDI does not exist anymore the way it used to be. And now we have a huge challenge of continuing these processes that were started in these 5 years. The creation of the alliance. And the good thing is that working in a network helps us to be able to move forward with these processes with partners that we have. And we have more than 16 companies that we are supporting with our alliance. And we work with communism, also agroforest and regenerative agriculture system. And in each of these, we look for the opportunities with the field, with the communities, with a team on the field. And we have a team that tries to make a relation with the markets as well. And it's part of the solution. So it's part of what the entrepreneurs are doing. So we have companies, for example, that in the case of cocoa, we try to find a relationship with markets that can pay this additional price. Caoca in France, for example, is a company that pays an additional price for the cocoa that comes from areas that help conservation. When we talk about regenerative cultures, and we work with a cotton company that produces clothes that come from products that have a sustainable origin. So we work with regenerative agriculture for cotton as well. And the associates are the final buyers of this merchandise. So we created this relationship. And when we talk about the conditions, we can also help to fund resources that governments sometimes have also for new communities and enterprises, but they're not necessarily aligned to the needs of the communities. So we make alliances so that these public funds can help to create conditions to enable us to move these products into more difficult markets. So we work with the local governments, for example, with public funds, when we deal with competitiveness and some of the criteria and some of the priorities, what products will be the priority so that we can keep social and economic sustainability. We've also been working with La Manca here in Peru. We have the cooperatives from credit funds that also help to place credit for small producers. And we designed a biocredit that is concentrated on the needs of the producers, of the farmers. And of course, we also have the support of sustainability and providing these credits for farmers that are doing something in the forest, something that has to do with regeneration of the forest. And the enabling conditions, we also work with the alignment and efforts that contribute to the climatic targets and biodiversity that many governments have, because sometimes it's difficult to find a connection with the efforts that are already done in the field. And we try to help so that these tools will create an impact in the enterprises so that we can continue with their targets and what the governments have at the national and international levels. So I'm going to stop here. And this was just an introduction of what our alliance does. Great. Great. Thank you very much. And I think with this last intervention from Percy, we can see that we have 4 types of experience that seem to be diversified, but they're actually very connected. There's a common purpose that they're looking for. So it's valuing the products of the socio-bioeconomy of the Amazon, an element that I believe to be very important. This valuation is done in the place, and they did not think about valuing exogenously. It's more endogenous for these products. And there is a view of the market, and without losing sight of what brings us together, which is love and the value that we put into conservation of the Amazon and the protagonism that the local populations should have. So we can observe that from Brazil, they showed us how this traditional product and the nut of the Amazon that can become a way of sustainable revenues in the case of Surinam and Brazil. Well, they shared several challenges that we have with regard to bioeconomy and socio-bioeconomy, regionally speaking, and with their origin in Brazil and in Origens, they talked about the alliances. And Luiz told us the story, something that is not done from one day to the next, right? But the union of different enterprises, like Percy told us, shows us the importance of creating platforms that connect funding. And this is something that you told me seems very interesting in terms of the development of instruments, alternative instruments, and the instruments that we are used to doing normally. So financial instruments for the local communities, they're not always adjusted according to the local realities. So let us keep going, and for us to go a little deeper into these topics that you talked about, I have some questions that I prepared for each of you. And in the same order that we started working, I would like to ask Keivan to help us by sharing how this process worked with the local communities. And I'd like to know the role of women and youth that have a critical challenge in the Amazonic communities in the participation. So if you could talk a little bit more about the role of women and youth and how they worked to get them involved in the work that you're doing. Keivan, over to you. It was a challenge initially. So to work with women and youth people in the production chain of the nut, because historically speaking, it was always dominated by men. And there was always a chauvinistic relationship, and the women were always in the second place in this chain, and the role of the women was in the kitchen, taking care of the children, and they did not have this role of being the main actors in the process and participating in the decision making. So when we brought the training to the communities and good management practices, we as an organization that basically was made up of women, all the processing until the trading of the product to the market, we saw how important it was to have women and young people participating in the process. So what did we start doing? The first thing was to listen. So bringing the men to talk to the women, and I saw the women, and I asked them how they felt and what they wanted to do as well, because many times the women, they are born with this kind of management, right? Innate management. So if they can manage the families, why can't they manage the community-based work? So we brought the women over to participate so they could bring their ideas, especially in the decision making. And we also brought other alternatives besides the collection of nuts and trading of the product that has female participation, but it's predominantly male participation. And we brought other possibilities like cooking courses with nuts and courses for female empowerment. We also have a project for funding of small communities in partnership with Conexus, which is another organization here from Brazil. And the project is for funding young people and women so that they can have some productive involvement and improve in the production of nuts in the Amazon. So it's, very slow work. Working in the Amazon is very difficult, as Luiz said, because besides the territories being very big, you know, the geographical expansion is absurd. Each territory has its specificities. There are regional issues. They have their own ways of making the culture. It's difficult to work with that, and it is very slow work. So this process of listening, active listening, and the participation of young people and women is extremely important for us to understand the pains and what they wish for, and also for us to notice the example of us as an organization that does management made by people, and there are women ahead of the business, and there's a woman who is the president, there are women who are the directors. So this is an example so that women can feel inspired to do other activities and not only the ones, for example, that have to do with the home. So there is this potential for women, and the listening process, the example, and I say it's also a process for the men who are part of this production chain, for them to open up their, you know, their involvement in these spaces so that women and young people can also participate, and for them to let go of the historical privilege, because they have been occupying this space for a long time, so they can also include women and youth in the management of the production chain.
Gracias, Keivan.
Thank you, Keivan.
Ahora, John,
So now, John,
tienes el privilegio de haber
you have the privilege of having seen the differences between Brazil and Suriname, right? That you have shared with us. And you were saying that one of the limitations, especially where there are these different forms of infrastructure, different services, in the case of Suriname, and it also happens in Brazil. But at the same time, we know the deficiency of the national governments, the frailty, right? So dreaming about how socio-bioeconomy could be in Suriname, how do you think we should articulate these different levels of the government and other partners so that they will be able to work together and innovate and develop these value chains?
Well, I think in this case, the place to start or to kind of base the development on is actually at the end of the chain. So I believe that what needs to happen is and that could be at sub-government level, or it could be government sponsored or government stimulated, but it would have to be on kind of a sectoral level. We need to establish enough dependable demand, right? So we need to establish significant pipeline so that we can then, with confidence, develop these supply chains on the ground. Because I think the formula is quite clear. You need to have the right educational facilities. So from a government level, we need to stimulate that type of research and educational programs. You need to have the certifying body, right? So like the Bureau of Standards Bureau that we have here would have to be activated. And then you need the kind of like development finance, right? So from my perspective, the government needs to stimulate or support these things, but then it kind of needs to get out of the way, right? The government needs to kind of let the market connect. And I think a major area where the government can help, again, is to bring that sustainable demand. Now, it might sound weird, but if you think about the way other industries have been formed, for example, the big push towards oil, that actually came when the UK fleet converted from coal to oil. So the government, the army at that point, was the largest buyer, right? So just as you have governments buying corn and buying rice and all these other things, using all these weird subsidies, the government could in fact be using or brokering some of these large-scale contracts that could then be plugged into the bioeconomy. And I think that's really a place to focus, because How to make the oils, the communities often already know, or it's very well established. How to ensure quality, again, already figured out. Kind of certifications, all of this has been done. Really what needs a concerted push now is that established, secure takeoff. And I think that there would be a place for either government or government-linked institutions to really help build that. And if you look at what's happening now internationally in terms of the way trade is developing, we see that there's also something of increased proximity between the EU and Latin America for trade due to some of the tariff issues that are going on worldwide. So that could also be something that could be taken advantage at a government level using the right diplomacy. So those are some of my thoughts on where I think government should come in. And you see, it's not necessarily a laissez-faire attitude, but it is one where we keep government in doing what it's supposed to do, which I think is to regulate and enable and not necessarily be too active in the actual rollout of these different things.
Muchas gracias, John.
Thank you very much, John. And it is exactly going back to what John is saying regarding the creation of this demand and the development of the markets. When Luiz was telling us about his experience, and it always happens in Latin America, it is clear that Brazil is big, it's a huge market, and the rest of the countries are very small when you compare. And when Luiz was telling us about this idea of the market and the development of the consumers, and also the experience from Brazil, and only Brazil also has an experience with other markets and in other places. Other places have also worked on these connections and with other markets that go beyond the borders of Brazil. Well, nowadays, the focus of the Origens network is the Brazilian market. So the great activity that we have is in the national market level. Why? And you said it very well. It's a huge country. It's very diverse. And as you also said very well, when we talk about the Amazon, it's several Amazons, several territories, several cultures, several different ways of doing it. It's not the same. So we say the Amazon, but there's a huge diversity there. We have to look at all of this complexity from the origin of the raw materials and the diversity of the origin of these products in the Amazon. And when we did our study, Humberto, I'm going to connect with Keivan. So most of the nuts, the Brazil nuts, they are consumed here in Brazil. So if it is consumed, if most of it is consumed inside Brazil, according to our study, the nuts from Bolivia, which is exported to many other countries, how can we, in this product, nuts, which is consumed mostly in here, how can we make this Brazilian market, this Brazilian consumer, these Brazilian companies, how can we make them recognize where this product comes from, how it is collected, and it's the only nut that is collected inside forests, that keep standing forests. So how can we create this in the imagination of Brazilian consumers so that they will know this story, they will recognize this as a product that conserves the forest, that provides environmental services for all of the Brazilian population and in the world, because it only rains in the Midwest for the production of soy and also corn. Why? Because there are standing forests in the Amazon that provide the rain. And there are communities that are protecting the forest and they are producing. And the nut is one of these products produced inside the forests. So the forest communities are the greatest providers of environmental services for the Brazilian population and for the production of food in here. So Brazilians need to recognize this. They need to value this, appreciate it, so that then we'll be able to put more products like pirarucu, copaíba oil, and babaçu flower, all of these that keep the forest standing so that the consumers will be proud of this production inside these forests managed by the local population. And Brazil will be proud of its standing forests and its traditional and indigenous populations. And this is something that you cannot hold back, value this sort of development of products in Europe, in the United States, in Asia. So our strategy is to change the culture of our country, of our consumer, our entrepreneur, and our agro, and recognize that they only produce food because there is a forest and there is the population that maintains the forest and which creates rain. So we have to have this non-polarized critical mass. And socio-bioeconomy is extremely important for the production of food as well, and the development of innovative products in the cosmetics industry and fashion. And for each sector, there's a different strategy. My time is running out, but we also work with international companies like Lush and Veja, and the tennis shoes I'm wearing, they also work very well with rubber. We talk about Natura, which is incredible. I admire it a lot. And we have several other companies like Veja, and they are developing a huge chain. And we also heard about great startups in the Amazon. The Carrefour Group now built Forest is Good, and they have products from there, from the forest. So I think we need Brazilians. I admire the Peruvians, the Incas, the Mayas, and Brazilians have to admire this population, but we also have people, right? We still have indigenous people here in Brazil, so let's recognize them as well. Let's, buy the products and services that they provide as well. We are creating a national culture so that we can develop this culture internationally of products coming out of socio-bioeconomy. Thank you very much, Luis. It's always very interesting to see how sane nationalism amongst all of the Amazon countries is very important. So looking at products that come from abroad, outside our regions, and consuming what we have, right? Of course. And the pride that Luiz is talking about, this is what we have to share. We have, that's what things we do and what we consume and what we're proud of. And I agree, Luiz. I think that in the view that we have in terms of the Pan-Amazon network, it's not, friends and enemies. No, we're all part of the development of the Amazon. And we have to recognize that there are different alternatives in this development, especially for local communities and the indigenous population. Socio-bioeconomy is a way of doing this and producing this. So I would like you to share with us a little bit, Percy, of the financial instrument that you were talking about, that you have developed, because one of the limitations that we also have in terms of the value chains is the access to funding. So there's a huge dependence of the initiatives and receiving financial assistance through international corporations and others, and opportunities that are limited to the socio-bioeconomy if we compare with other economic products, something that has to do with soybean or other kinds of production. So could you please share a little bit more about your experience with regard to the development of these financial products, or what you know about other alternatives, other things that you can share with us? Yes, of course. Well, one of the main objectives of the Alliance is to be a facilitator of these processes. And at this moment, what we try to do is find connections. In this case, for example, in the financial system of cooperatives, credit economy, and we have all of these small farmers as customers. And I was really interested in having additional funds. But the demands from abroad are bigger all the time, and they demand the respect for the environmental criteria. And the cooperatives have not really developed these environmental capacities. So that's exactly what we're looking for, the connection between the needs of the cooperatives in managing to obtain credit and for the credit to actually have access, for them to have access to these green credit lines. For that, we needed to teach this financial instrument to everyone. So the Alliance has a team of people, and it's people who have experience in this project, in this ideation that helped create all of this. And besides that, there's also the Ministry of the Environment that was interested in promoting subjects in this green line and bringing all of this together, something that the ministry had already decided, the criteria and the indicators for these tools. So from these 3 points, with the Ministry of the Environment, the credit operators, they are all grouped together in a structure that is at the second level. And it's a federation of cooperatives. So we were funding only the ideation of this instrument. And when we fund this, we unblocked these funds so that this could be invested in these small producers that were working with the agroforest issues and regenerative agriculture, not only as an economic criterion, but also based on environmental and social criteria. So these credits would have to be respected in terms of the environmental behavior. And it is the tool that allowed and that allows the cooperatives, when they have credit, they can also make a report. It's kind of like a green credit. And therefore, it wasn't only necessary to arrange this with these small producers, but also have the capacity of being able to evaluate what was being funded and what was actually an agroforest environment, and it was a cooperative. So it was necessary to be able to read the criteria in loco, and in a way that there would be access to the tools or the green report, so that here we call it the ID, right? So every producer is going to have their own ID. So if there was any deforestation in their region, in their property, because of course this was connected to, the documents that you could not have had deforestation for at least 10 years. There was no, and the use of chemical products. This did not include any of these agents that were not prohibited. Sorry, I forgot one of them, but we didn't have all of this information, and it was not being updated properly in a database. So basically, we crossed the information in several agencies that had the information. We centralized everything in a single tool, and we would go to the field and check the coordinates to know if that producer actually had the right to this biocredit. And this is how we work, and that's how we worked for regenerative agriculture and agroforest agriculture. And now we're in the process of also working with the Federation of Cooperatives to be able to provide credit and to think about credit for fishing and agriculture, and ideation was in this initial project. Yes. Well, don't worry. Don't worry about the time. We're still here. Well, we're here to listen to your experience. So since we don't have more questions, I have many questions for this last round, and I would like to ask each one of you individually, You are sharing the dream. How do you see this value chain being developed and including socio-bioeconomy in the Amazon? And together with this dream, what is the main challenge that you have in terms of innovation, in terms of access to funding and markets? Do you think that we can work together? And I think that one of the key elements of the network that we propose is this collaborative sort of work. And in terms of collaboration, I would like to invite you to dream, and please share your dream with us and accept the challenges. Everybody who works in this area in the promotion of bioeconomy in the Amazon. So now let's continue. Let's start with Keivan once again. Please share your dream with us. So my dream for the bioeconomy of the Amazon is that the traditional population can also be inserted in these discussions. In the last events that I've participated in, I have seen entrepreneurs, I have seen governors deciding things, deciding protocols, and the future of bioeconomy in Brazil and the Amazon, the bioeconomy of the Pan-Amazonic region, without consulting the traditional population. And when I go, I always tell them it's important for them to be consulted because, as Luiz said, they are the ones who are there in the territory, developing bioeconomy, maintaining the standing forest, and using the products of the Amazon that are economically viable, and also contributing to maintain this standing forest and mitigating the climatic changes in our planet. So that's my dream in the Amazon, for the population to be respected and valued, for them to be included more so that we can build a production chain and a bioeconomy that is more inclusive, where we will have more young people, youth, and indigenous population as well inserted in the process. And the interests should be aligned equally, not only for one side. You know, there are the conflicts of interest, and things will be built for a bioeconomy that will encourage economic and sustainable development, as well as maintaining the standing forest, and especially the traditional communities, where they will be recognized as an agent of innovation, because many times they're not. You know, it's the startups, it's the companies that are developing innovation, and they are going to make the bioeconomy be leveraged. No, the solution was already there in the territory. The solution is the people. So there's a partner that is called Gente como Caminho para a Sustentabilidade. So it's people, which gives us the way to sustainability. So the people who are inserted in the territory are the ones who are making this great effort, and the interests of bioeconomy should be aligned with people who are part of this process, the people who are there at the community base, doing the management of the forest, managing the forest, and contributing to the conservation of the planet. Humberto, you also asked about something else, the challenge, right? I think the great challenge that we have in terms of bioeconomy is, besides having this alignment done, is to bring investment, not only the government, but also funding machines, so that solutions like Imaflora and other partners that are here, solutions for ASSOAB that already have ready-made business models, and many times they don't have funding capacity to make this role. So more investment should be coming, and the investment should be coming to the associations directly, and in the NGOs that are partners that are working directly in the territory. So without the partnership of governance, without the governmental companies and the entrepreneurs and the third sector, we're not able to work and build a complete economy that is going to develop by itself. It is necessary to have a network of partners making this happen. And If we know about the organizations that are working in the territory, they must also have the opportunity of doing their work in the most adequate manner and generating a social and environmental impact that bioeconomy allows us so that this wheel will turn.
Ok. No sé, creo que yo me quedé congelado.
Okay, I think I froze a little for a little there. No? No, we see you. Okay.
John,
So, John,
Yeah.
tu sueño.
Well, the dream that
your
I'm
dreams.
at least working towards is we want the Biotara network to encompass 100 cooperatives spread throughout Amazonia, each of those cooperatives owning and running their own business, capturing, the lion's share of the revenue, and have them be in a position to laugh at anybody who comes there trying to cut down the forest and offering them peanuts to create soy fields or other things that are, in my perspective, wasteful usage of our beautiful Amazon forest. That's my dream. My dream is to have these 100 thriving businesses, community owned, conservation linked, biodiverse, rich cooperatives spread throughout Amazon. That's the dream. And I would love to see the cosmetics and personal care industry take just a little bit of that $200 billion market, $200 billion market, and spend it appropriately buying directly from the cooperatives. That's what I want to see. Now, in terms of challenges, it has been incredibly challenging to get funded. So to secure funding for the type of company we are, which is an impact first, profit second, that's been incredibly difficult to get funded. But we've been able to do so. It just took a really long time. But I think some of the bigger challenges again come back to that dependable large scale offtake, which is just not there yet. And I believe that with the right consumer focus and with the right diplomacy and right government support, we could establish those huge pipelines. And I think that's really one of the main things that needs to happen. And from there, the infrastructure investments will follow.
Thank you very much, John. A continuación, Luis.
Let us continue with Luiz. Well, very inspiring words from our colleagues here. And I'm going to start with the challenge that we have. In our case, in our country, it's the 60s and the 70s. Our government made a choice to be a great producer of foods, so to stop being an importer of foods. And when the government made this choice, it actually promoted Brazil as a great producer of food. But then there was the choice of a lot of deforestation. It was a choice of the country that had pros and cons. So this is a great challenge because the opportunity, my dream is for our government to be progressive and conservative and will make a real choice where bioeconomy, which is the choice that was made, that the government will choose from now on to put bioeconomy, which is the economy of life. That's what it means, that the economy of life will be actually placed as a strategic agenda. So that's my dream based on the challenge that was placed. And I hope that Brazilians and the Latin Americans, our brothers and hermanos, they will believe that bioeconomy is the best strategy for the future of our countries. And we are responsible also for the survival of the whole of humankind. I think a lot of it is here, and we have to believe it. That's my contribution.
Muchas gracias, Luis.
Thank you very much, Luis. And finally, Percy. Yes. So it's a little bit aligned with what they just said. My dream would be exactly this: the addition of development in the Amazon, and it will be a socio-bioeconomy. So it will really appreciate its potential, its biodiversity and traditional knowledge and the ecosystem services. So let's say that now the markets are a niche for this kind of added value, right? It exists, but they're very small. And my dream is for this to grow, right? To become mainstream. And not only niche markets like what we have today. I would like it to be expanded, and everybody will come to this consensus of what we want as a vision, as a value, and in bioeconomy. And the challenge is for the competency, it's basically in terms of development, the industrial development and the informality that exists in the Amazon, the extraction, and there's a terrible boom for gold in Peru nowadays. So these threats, they're going to continue to be a challenge, but I'm very optimistic. And I think that there is a perspective in giving value to biodiversity and the traditional knowledge of the population, and what is offered by these ecosystems will reign. That's what I wanted to finish with. Thank you, Percy. And our time flew by even faster than I thought. So let's see what happens, but we have come to the final part of this session, the end of this session, and I would like to conclude, first of all, thanking our panel members. So Keivan, John, Luiz, Percy, it has been a great exchange, a very inspiring exchange. I like it when we not only talk about technical things, but also what moves us, what touches us. And I think we have this in the Amazon, and what is important in terms of our desires and our inspirations. So in this last round, when you talked about your dreams, it's really very inspiring. So from the Pan-Amazonic Network, and we would like to thank you, and part of this forum of investment and innovation. Thank you to all of you who have joined us in this transmission. And this will be recorded. This has been recorded. You will be able to have access to it. Thank you very much for your attention. And thank you to the members of the panel for their participation. Thank you.